Thank you, Luca. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. It is an honor and privilege to be here speaking to you from New York City, and I hope you are all doing well, and I hope you enjoyed today's NAMX meeting and got to sit through a lot of the workshops, and I hope that they were valuable to you. In this next presentation, I'm going to kind of bring you an overview of what's happening in the world of cloud connectivity and data centers. As Lucas said, the foundations of the internet. This is the infrastructure that powers everything we do online today. Our agenda is going to be pretty simple. We're going to break it down into 3 modules. The first module will go into cloud. We'll give a brief market overview and highlight some of the trends that we're seeing. And then we'll talk about what's happened in the last 75 days, and then we'll go into a Q&A. We'll head into module 2 about connectivity. We'll do the same thing, give a brief market overview, talk about some of the trends, give some highlights of what's happened in the last 75 days, and go into a Q&A, and then we'll repeat that again for the 3rd module of data centers. Quick introduction, for those that don't know me, my name is Koch. I am a product manager at Packet Fabric. I am a co-founder of the New York Network Operators Group and currently serve as a president on the board of directors. I'm also a board member of the Seattle Internet Exchange. In the past, I have held a number of roles in engineering, strategy, and infrastructure management at companies such as Twitter, Microsoft, QTS, and Globix. One of my passion hobbies is sending a newsletter to a lot of people who are interested in learning and understanding what's going on in the world of infrastructure. And that's why I'm here today. And I want to put this one slide up as we get started because I feel this is very important, and this is what's really driven my decision to start that newsletter and bring information to people, because to be informed is to be empowered. The more information you have, the more you know about things, the more you're empowered to make better decisions, to have better and more meaningful conversations. And I started this newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter, and it's very high level. We talk about what's going on, and hopefully you get those insights that you need to have those better conversations and to make better decisions at work. With that said, let's get things started. We're going to start with this one slide here. This shows technology adoption rates from some of the most groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting technologies, such as the laptop, the smartphone, and online music. With the 3 of those technologies, you can see those S-curves are completed. That life cycle of the technology adoption is over. Most people have adopted them. They've got a massive amount of users using and leveraging those technologies. But what really sticks out here and what I really want to call attention to is the red line at the bottom. That's cloud adoption. And it's highlighting the percentage of enterprise workloads that have moved to the cloud. That number is 22%. This slide is as of the end of 2018, so it will probably inch up a little bit more when this data comes out, probably in the next month or 2. With that said, this slide is interesting because it poses the mere scale of what's to come. As you can see, we haven't even begun to move into the upward trajectory of cloud adoption yet. We're going to start with cloud. So a market overview on what's going on with cloud and kind of the scale of cloud computing. The graph on the left shows the top global cloud service providers by regions and availability zones. As you can see, Amazon on the far right leads the way in the number of availability zones, followed only closely by Google, Alibaba, Tencent, and so on. You can see on the left, Microsoft leads the way in regions, and this number is even higher than what's on the graph with the latest announcements that Microsoft has made that you'll learn about today. In the graph on the right, we show the market share of cloud service providers broken down by revenue. Amazon continues to lead the way at over 50% market share, followed by Microsoft. After Microsoft, we have Alibaba IBM, Google, and the rest of the pack. On the left, we see the most popular data center markets by availability zones. As no surprise, Northern Virginia remains the highest concentration of cloud and data center infrastructure in the world. And we see that same picture on the graph on the right. And that's of who are the largest wholesale data center markets by power capacity. If we look back to the slide on the left, we can see that Beijing is the second highest cloud region by availability markets, followed by London and Frankfurt. On the right, if we look at power again, we've got London as the second largest market by power capacity, followed by Dallas and then Silicon Valley. So with that overview, let's get into what's been happening in the world of cloud computing. The last 75 days today, AWS has crossed the US $10 billion threshold in quarterly revenue. They have launched 2 new CloudFront Edge locations in Kolkata, India, and Hamburg, Germany. They launched their second Direct Connect location in Bahrain, and that's in their own data center. Their Outpost product, which, if you're not familiar with, is a rack of AWS compute and storage infrastructure that you can put in any data center or any on-premise location. They've extended that availability to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Milan. They've also launched the 23rd region, AWS Africa, and that's in Cape Town, South Africa. They've launched the 24th region in Milan, Italy, and they've launched another Direct Connect location in Milan, Italy. AWS has about 7 or 8 or 9 sites in Italy. So moving on, the last 75 days, what's happened? Google Cloud reported 2.7 billion US in revenue, which is up 52% year over year. They launched their 23rd region in Las Vegas in the US. They also released an inter-region latency and throughput dashboard, so you can see real-time statistics or historical statistics of how their network is performing. For Microsoft, they have reported 13.3 billion US in revenue, and that it grew 59% year over year. I must notify you of a caveat with this, is that Microsoft does not report its Azure cloud computing revenue by itself alone. Grouped within that revenue number is also LinkedIn Business and other SaaS applications for business that Microsoft sells. They announced new regions in New Zealand, Poland, and Italy. They launched express route locations and Mega I in Hong Kong, and also in Sabi data centers in Quincy, Washington. Microsoft also acquired Metaswitch Networks, which was also on the heels of another network provider, Affirmed Networks. Both of these networking providers make software for mobile and wireless functions. So we can see as 5G and the mobile landscape continues to evolve, the cloud providers are getting deeper and deeper into that territory. The last 75 days today, the remaining cloud providers, or at least a handful of them, Alibaba has announced that they will invest over US 28 billion over the next 3 years in their cloud business and infrastructure. DigitalOcean, a smaller cloud headquartered here in New York, launched its 3rd data center region in San Francisco, California. DigitalOcean also raised $50 million US in Series C funding. DigitalOcean again also announced that they have an annual run rate of $300 million a year. Linode, another small but popular cloud platform, launched an app marketplace, making it easy for customers to click and provision applications on their cloud platform. And last but not least, Oracle announced a 2nd region in South Korea. With that said, we'll open up the floor for Q&A right now. If anybody has any questions about anything on the previous slides, please raise your hand and we'll get to you.
Use the Q&A panel if you have questions, and I will read them. Otherwise, we can have probably questions also on this segment, Christian, at the very end if they come.
Absolutely. Maybe
Okay.
give it 10 seconds. If there's none, we'll move on.
We have one question. Which job profiles will flourish for this? Or profile, sorry.
Jobs. You know, with the growth of cloud computing, I think there are a number of types of jobs that will really flourish. Well, with obviously, you know, the cloud needs a data center, right? So data center jobs, technicians in data centers, system administrators, and engineers working in facilities and engineering. And then on the cloud side, it's everything: software engineers, network engineers. They have their own data center teams, right? So I think it's a pretty positive impact for, you know, job seekers and job roles across the spectrum.
May I ask let's say a personal interest question? What about the IXPs? Will it generate more jobs or more, let's say, work for the IXPs, or will it move traffic away from IXPs?
I think the answer is actually both. Is that you will see more direct and private connectivity to clouds, but the IXPs will also benefit and grow from that, as there is still a lot of IP traffic between the networks and the end users and the businesses sitting in offices that have to get to the cloud. So I think both are going to grow and both are going to benefit from the growth of cloud computing.
Thank you. And since I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box, let's move to the next section.
Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about connectivity. Again, starting with the market overview and trends. This is a couple of infographics from Cisco's annual internet report. The two images on the left, one showing traditional data center traffic forecast between 2016 and 2021. In 2021, it's predicted to traditional data center traffic will be at 1.7 zettabytes. Cloud data center traffic in 2021, orders of magnitude larger, is predicted to be at 18.9 zettabytes. Where does that data center traffic originate? Some traffic will be from the data center end users, and some will be between data centers, and some will be within the data center. As we can see by these two images on the left, it really highlights how big cloud really is. Okay, on this one, we also see that that traffic from data centers to end users will be 14.9% of total data center traffic, and that 13.6% will come from traffic between data centers. 71% of traffic will be coming from within the data center. So again, pretty stark highlights of what's happening and where data is moving and how traffic is evolving. On this slide, again, from the Cisco annual internet report, we show a global picture of internet users and population, devices and connections, and average broadband speeds. So globally, we see internet users as a percent of the population in 2023 will rise to 66% from 51% in 2018. Devices and connections per capita we see will rise to 3.6 in 2023 from 2.4 in 2018. The average broadband speed will increase to 110 megabits per second by 2023. For the next image, it's about mobile. The number of mobile users percentage per population will be 71% in 2023 compared to 66% in 2018. The number of devices and connections per capita will be 1.6 in 2023 compared to 1.2 in 2018. And the average mobile speeds will rise to 43.9 megabits per second globally in 2023, up from 13.2 megabits per second in 2018. This is a report that I track myself and I release quarterly. It's tracking mostly public companies here in the US and globally on how interconnection is growing. What we can see is Equinix continues to lead the way, doing almost $1 billion in interconnection revenue a year, with that reported number in Q1 2020 being 242 million, seeing a 3% quarter-over-quarter growth. Compared to their next biggest peer, Digital Realty, 69 million in US in revenue in Q1 2020, 6% of growth. That number is a little bit higher than the previous months because of the Weston Building acquisition. If you guys know, if anybody knows about Seattle or the US infrastructure, Digital Realty acquired the remaining asset of the Weston Building in Seattle. So they added a large number of cross connects there. I think it was 10,000 cross connects they added. If we move down to virtual connections, the only two companies that really provide any color on what's happening here are Equinix and Megaport. And those are just VLANs, right? So those are VLANs between cloud providers, they're VLANs between business partners, they're VLANs between service providers. Equinix is growing at 7% a quarter and has about 24,000 virtual connections as of the last quarter. Megaport is growing a little bit faster though, at almost 14% or almost 2 times, and they have about 8,500 virtual connections as of last quarter. As no surprise to many, or maybe it's a surprise to some, Equinix leads the way in cross connects with over 340,000 physical cross connects, growing at a rate of a little bit over 1%. Total cross connects tracked for these public companies that report numbers is over 500,000, 560,000. And that's growing at, that whole market is growing at a little bit more than 3% quarter over quarter. And the disclaimer here is, these are only public companies that report their data. There is a lot more data centers and there's a lot more cross connects and a lot more interconnections out there. So just take that when you look at this. It's not a full picture of the market, but it's a slice of it. This next slide is a little bit hard to read. There's a lot going on, but I figured to highlight who are the major interconnection hubs around the world. So we've got some highlighted on the left in the Americas, where you can, if you know, you got the Equinix data centers in Ashburn, Virginia, and you've got Equinix data centers in Silicon Valley, and a couple others in Chicago and so forth. And then in EMEA, you see some of your stuff in London, like Telehouse and some of the interaction sites. And then we move over to APAC and we see the major interconnection hubs in APAC. Cloud on-ramps. So what is a cloud on-ramp? First of all, cloud on-ramp is one of the cloud providers, network routers, switches, that provides that direct access into the cloud environment. They typically co-locate these cloud on-ramps in a couple data centers in each market. And then you have providers like myself at Packet Fabric, Megaport, Equinix, as well as the internet exchanges who also provide direct connectivity to clouds, connect to those on-ramps and are able to offer that private connectivity to the cloud environment. This slide right here, this table shows what the cloud on-ramp locations looks like by data center provider. So it's pretty obvious that in the middle, you can see Equinix with over 20 cloud on-ramps for almost every single provider, other than Alibaba and Oracle, which they have 12, but it's still higher by an order of magnitude versus all the other colocation providers where cloud on-ramps live. All right, let's talk about what's happened in the last 75 days. We're going to talk about connectivity here, and it's going to lean a little bit more towards interconnection because that's, we're here. This NAM2020 is an internet exchange point, and it's kind of one of the areas that I focus on a little bit more. But let's start. DKIX and NetNode signed an agreement to interconnect DKIX Frankfurt and NetNode Stockholm. So NetNode Stockholm customers in Sweden can connect to DKIX Frankfurt and vice versa. They have plans to connect other sites eventually down the future, but this was a start. DKIX and Lambda Helix announced the C6, which stands for the Southeastern European Cloud and Interconnection Exchange in Athens, Greece. BBIX, a very popular internet exchange in Japan, operated by SoftBank, has deployed to the third data center in Osaka, Japan. PCCW's Console Connect Network as a Service platform expanded within Australia in multiple data centers in Sydney, Perth, and Brisbane. Megaport expanded their platform to France with 3 data centers and more coming by the end of the year. NetIX, a network as a service platform fabric and internet exchange offering, expanded into NJFX data center in an NYC metro area, which also serves as a cable landing station for some new and old popular cables, specifically Aquacom's Havru, which is coming. Packet Fabric, disclaimer, I work at Packet Fabric full-time, but Packet Fabric partnered with Zenfi Networks, the largest fiber provider in the New York City metro area, to expand the network within the New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut metro area and enterprise buildings. Eurofiber expands its DC Spine platform. DC Spine is a platform just like Megaport and Packet Fabric, which is owned and operated by Eurofiber and mostly operates within Belgium, and I think just expanding into the Netherlands as well. But they announced the expansion of their platform to 2 QTS data centers in the Netherlands. And last but not least, on this slide, Telecom Italia opened up settlement-free interconnection at the Mix in Milan and NAM2020 Rome as I'm pretty sure at the beginning or shortly after when the global pandemic started. So moving on, Facebook announced the 2 Africa submarine cable system project. The cable is massive. It is something like 37,000 kilometers long and lands in over 18 or 19 cable landing stations in Africa, as well as multiple sites in Europe. Telecom Italia had acquired a fiber pair on Google's Curry cable system, which connects South America to Los Angeles in the United States. Not everything is glam and glitter and good news. Satellite provider OneWeb filed for bankruptcy. Satellite provider Intelsat also filed for bankruptcy. Telecom provider Frontier, the 8th largest ISP in the United States, also filed for bankruptcy. Last but not least, EU Networks has raised 250 million euros for growth, which will include M&A and organic growth in Europe. With that said, we'll leave a few minutes for Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Of course, if you couldn't read NAMX in that list of interconnection places, it's just for the fine print, right, Christian?
Exactly.
Actually, there is a comment from Luca Cicchelli, who is right. Telecom Italia opened settlement-free interconnects also at Topics.
That is excellent news, and I didn't know that. So look, see, I don't know everything.
Yes.
Thank you, Luca.
And if there are no more questions, I actually have, if you could go back to that global slide where we see the number of devices, fixed and mobile. It's kind of interesting to me. Maybe I'm not really aware of how this is. What kind of devices are really covered here? Because if we think about normal devices, I can think of the TV getting into the list, and I'm wondering if this growth is just the number of same devices that grows, or if there are new devices that are thought into, are taken into account for this device growth. And the second question is, if we also count for IoT as devices or connections per capita, isn't that growth a little bit small?
Yeah, Luca, that's a great question, and I think I echo your question on this. And there might be some more data in the actual report as it's pretty long, but that number does look low, and maybe just might be for mobile phones. But I'm not really sure off the top of my head. I would think that number is low to also include any type of IoT or connected device, though.
Okay, thanks. And not a question, but a comment again from Luca Cicchelli. Great overview. Thank you. So I think we can move to the next section. But again, if you have questions on the section 1 and section 2, feel free to ask them, and I can read them to Christian at the very end, and we go back to the slides if needed. let's go to the next section, Christian.
Thank you. All right, let's go into data centers. We're going to start with this graph. This is by Synergy Research. It's showing the colocation market growth by segment and customer. Colocation market has typically been divided into two sections. Your wholesale colocation operators and your retail colocation, right? So your retail colocation is like your Equinix and your telehouse and your interaction, where you go put a rack of servers or network connectivity, and you connect to all these different network providers and internet exchanges that you want. And the wholesale space is obviously for the bigger deployments where all your compute and your storage lives. What we see here that's very interesting, and this is a Q1 growth rate, is hyperscale operators. And hyperscale is the guys taking down really large amounts of space, right? Those are the clouds, Microsoft, Google, but those are also people like Facebook and Uber and other very large infrastructure absorbers. But they're leading the way in both wholesale and retail. And probably in retail, it could be because of smaller regions are getting created by some of these cloud providers and markets that they're just not sure of, but they want to expand and really bring that infrastructure out broadly. But also those edge locations that perform caching and CDN services, or other types of termination like SSL termination, or those cloud on-ramps. So I thought that was an interesting thing to see, is how the hyperscale operators are really leading the way in growth in both. With that, we'll move on. Here's
Listen, just a brief interruption. That in a second, in a minute or two, we'll have another webinar starting. So just to let the audience know this, and also for you to know that if there's anything really important to say, you may want to put it up front now.
Great. I'll speed it up a little bit. We'll skip through the next slides. If you're familiar with the site Cloud Scene, they've got some top 10 rankings, broken down by geographic region, showing the top 10 data centers in that region by the amount of connectivity, the amount of network fabrics, and whatever algorithm that they put together. So we see those on those two slides, and everybody, you'll be able to get these slides and look through them yourself afterwards. So quick last 75 days. Equinix acquired data centers across Canada from Bill. Digital Colony launched a new hyperscale platform in Latin America. Digital Realty and Ascenti are building 2 data centers in Mexico. Digital Realty announced a major expansion in France. Interaction Digital Park, which will consist of something like 4 data centers. KKR formed a new hyperscale data center business in Europe. Global Technical Realty, which was being led by the founder of Zenium. LCL in Belgium acquired a data center from Atos, marking its 4th facility in Belgium, and Vantage acquired NGD in the UK. Terraco is planning a US $220 million expansion in South Africa. Equinix and GIC expanded their joint venture to build hyperscale data centers in Japan. Equinix opened its 4th data center in Singapore. NextDC raised US $400 million to accelerate its growth initiatives and complete its Sydney data center. GPX launched a cloud exchange in its Mumbai data center campus, and BDX acquired a former Telstra data center in Singapore. FPT Telecom is building the largest data center in Vietnam in the Saigon area. And Q&A, if there's anything here, but I'll go real quick to just tell you real quick about the Global Interconnection Survey. Last year, I kicked this off as the first annual Global Interconnection Survey. Some of the highlights: 48% of respondents say that more network traffic will be exchanged privately versus the public internet. 10 gigabit Ethernet is the most common port size used for interconnection, and 93% of respondents are connecting to partners via an internet exchange. The 2020 survey is coming soon. Keep a lookout, and please, you'll be able to get these slides and go and download the 2019 survey for more data and insights. Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Let me, first of all, tell everyone that the reason we invited you is exactly because of your newsletter, which Maurizio and I read regularly, and we think it's very interesting. So that's why we asked you to give a speech, and we invited you for this webinar. Also, apologies if I didn't say your last name correctly. So I learned now it's Koch, right?
That's okay. Everybody outside the U.S. pronounces it like you, so I've gotten used to it.
I think it's the German accent.
It is German, of German nature.
So comment with a thank you, sir, and another comment with very interesting thank you. Could you share the presentation? And maybe if you send it to me, I can then forward it to the people attending this webinar.
Yes, absolutely. Please share it with everybody.
And with that, I don't see anything else. So I thank you very much. And it's been very, very interesting. And I think there has been some interest also for us IXPs. I see that not only people from topics like Luca who made comments, but also people from Mix are connected. So I think you gave us some good food for thought.
Excellent.
Thank you again, Christian, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Maurizio, as well. And thank you, everybody else. And hope you got something out of this and found it valuable. The slides will be available. Feel free to connect with me as well.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.